Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Now, Barb, many home sellers think that once they accept an offer, it's a done deal and they can start packing. Is that true, or should home sellers move forward with a little bit more caution?
Well, a lot of my clients, Richard, like to get ahead of the game and have a plan and execute it. And moving is a massive project. So it's not like you can just accept a contract and be expected to move in 30 days and do nothing. You have to do something because for most people, even if the house is halfway, cleared out, it's a project. And so a lot of sellers are very, very happy when they accept a contract, and in their minds, we're good to go. We're moving towards the finish line. And it was funny. I explained it to one of my clients a few years ago. I was presenting, fortunately, several offers to him. And I explained we had a cash offer on the table that was a little bit less than the offer that was getting financing. And he goes, so exactly how does this work? Because they don't do it. They've been in the house 35 years. And I said, well, you accept a contract, then the buyer does an inspection, then they ask for stuff. Hopefully you reach agreement on what happens on the inspection. Then the appraiser comes in. As long as the appraiser thinks that the home is worth the agreed upon sales price, then you're moving forward in the process. But that happens next, maybe 2, 3 weeks into the process. So you could be a week before closing and still not know if the deal is going to go through. So it's very frustrating for sellers. And he looked at me, he's an ex-Marine, and he goes, seems to me you're just wallowing around in the mud until it's over. Is that right? I said, that's exactly right.
Oh my
And
God.
so he took the cash deal because that at least cut out maybe a week to a week and a half of the process. That way he knew that once they passed inspection, okay, we're good to go. We can pack up our big house, get things out of here, because the house is no longer going to look show ready once you've started that process. So I think, people assume they can start packing and just take the house apart as soon as they accept a contract. But it's better to try to get ahead of as much of that as possible before you go on the market. Like, get rid of any furniture you're not going to take with you, declutter as much as possible, pack up the seasonal things that you're not going to use that time of year. Have that ready to go before you go on the market. And that way, when you do accept a contract, then you just have a finite amount of things that you need to move. And you kind of got to plan on moving that stuff, in most cases, about a week to 10 days prior to closing. So the most common failures of contracts are inspections. So the way the state has set up the contracts in Colorado, basically, a seller accepts a contract, and then the buyer has all these opportunities to bail out, no harm, no foul, and get their earnest money back all the way until the end, unfortunately, but that's true. So how does the seller know? How do they have the certainty that they're actually going to go and move out and not and still have their house? That could happen. It has happened. But the best thing that you can do is just plan ahead for it as much as possible. But I would say definitely don't start packing before the inspection, because that's probably the most common situation where a deal is going to fall apart. And there's lots of things to consider with inspections. There are so many different things that could be scrutinized by a buyer. And I just got a contract termination last night where the buyer said, and this house is perfection. I was pretty shocked that they said they were terminating over inspection. I said, so why are you terminating? What's wrong with the house? The house is perfect. And the answer was, well, I'll tell you as soon as you release my earnest money. I'm like, don't play extortion with me. Some of the stuff these agents do are just insane. But anyway, what I had to explain to the seller is the buyer could walk away if they don't like the paint color. They could walk away if they don't like their loan. They could walk away if they don't like title work. They could walk away if they don't like the appraisal. I mean, they basically have a get out of jail free card They will have to spend money on their own inspection and their own appraisal, but there's lots of opportunities for the buyer to walk and none for the seller to get out unless you don't reach agreement on inspection and unless it doesn't appraise and the seller is unwilling to lower their price to match the appraisal. So it's very frustrating for sellers when that happens because they've kind of in their mind going, okay, I got this done. Now I'm working on moving. I'm getting insurance. I'm changing utilities. I'm getting all these things underway. Even though the contract says the home is sold as is, where is, with all its faults, the buyers still tend to ask for, quote, broken stuff to be resolved. Okay. Some of them will ask for upgrades, which is absolutely unreasonable. I just had one that asked for all new plumbing, and that buyer walked away over that. But basically, there's a wide opportunity for the buyer to do all the due diligence that they want, and they can still walk away later in the process. That's why I'm saying wait to completely pack or get ahead of your packing so that you have very little things to move at the end. And we have a hard time, I have a system for it. It happens less frequently, actually, than it would, than you think. It was probably 90% of homes would go through once they got a contract. It might be a little bit less than that right now. And there are various reasons. I had one fall apart because the buyer lost his job. Well, sorry, there's nothing you can do about that. But if it's, quote, an inspection that's not explained, and there's nothing condition-wise wrong with the house, to me, that indicates that I wasn't being told the truth, that in factuality, it was probably the buyer changed their mind for whatever reason. So I have systems for it to kind of protect the seller to make sure some crazy stuff doesn't happen on inspections. Like I tell them, okay, you got to give 2 days notice for the inspection. You can't just give out the combo to the inspector, let them open the door and have at the house for 3 hours going over systems without a licensed escort. And unfortunately, there is no license in the state of Colorado to be an inspector. I could be an inspector, and I'm very scary with the tool in my hand unless it's a pen. So I can tell you that I've seen a lot of problems happen during inspection. So I've tried to get ahead of that by creating what I call this policy that I send out to the buyer's agents every time we have an inspection and let them know these are my rules. These are the rules that my seller has directed me to institute according to what has happened in the past. Number one, you have to escort your buyer. We're not going to just let an unlicensed, unqualified Joe Billy Bob inspector in the house for hours and hours without, quote, an escort. Now, the question is the escort paying attention? That's a whole nother story that probably isn't happening. I've had agents actually tell me, well, going to an inspection is a complete waste of my time. And I'm like, seriously, you're spending 15 minutes to write a contract, maybe 2 hours to go to an inspection. Then you do a walkthrough and appraisal. So you spend all of 4 or 5 hours. You make thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's a waste of your time. I mean, who doesn't want this gig? I was trying to explain it to my Marine son, and he goes, wow. So I have a feeling he might be waiting in real estate at the end of the day after he gets out of the Marines. But anyway, so what recently happened, on a very cold day, we had an inspector come into the house. Last week, Friday, it was freezing, okay? He turned off the furnace, off, right? And didn't turn it back on. So when the seller gets home, I get this panicky call with the seller saying, my house is 45 degrees. He turned off the furnace. I've never turned off the furnace because it's always on auto. I don't know how to get it turned back on. So I'm calling the agent. Of course, the inspector won't take responsibility for it. He goes, no, I found it that way. Then last night, when we get the inspection objection, the objection said that the basement toilet was removed. It was missing and it wasn't properly sealed. Now, my instructions are, if you have to pull a toilet to check a sewer line, you need to bring in a licensed plumber. Well, obviously that did not happen. And so what the seller found last night when he went down to look at the toilet is the toilet obviously had been removed because the inspector took the bath mat, drug it over to put it under his knees. And when he put the toilet back on, the bath mat got stuck underneath of it. It wasn't like that before. And I'm just like, oh my God, so they're not qualified to do it. They don't read the directions that I give them. And it's reaching a point for me where I just have to say, all right, we're done with this. We're going to have to babysit everything you guys do because you're not qualified to do this job. Anyway, that's the world according to Barb. And so I try to make the process as easy as possible and let the sellers know in advance that we could have some problems on the inspection. So do not start packing until that's over. My name is Barb Schlinker. I'm the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show. And we're talking about house sales and whether or not they fall through, how often that happens, and what you can do to protect yourself. And that's what we're going to talk about coming back after the break. Richard?
You're listening to Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And if you're interested in selling your home and you want to talk to Barb, give her a call, 719-301-3900. And we're talking, Barb, about how a seller can prepare their move just in case their home sale falls through. What else can they do?
Well, I would say the first thing you would do, even before you go on the market, is pack up the things that you're not going to need. Get rid of, repurpose, resell, whatever the things that you're not going to take with you. Declutter as much as possible. And I would hit every room in the house and get ahead of that. That way, when it is time to move, even if you have a shorter time period when you're absolutely certain it's going through, you don't have as much to deal with. It's not as bad as eating an elephant, because moving is like eating an elephant. It's a big project. It's not just moving the stuff. It's making sure the house is clean, make sure the utilities are done, this and that. There's so much to do. So I would definitely hold off on packing until after the inspection. Some deals will fall out over an appraisal, but that is less common. So I think once you get past an inspection, you're pretty certain it's going to go through. And then we have some systems like our certified pre-owned home program that can get you ahead of it. I have a house under contract right now that was built in 1962. And the seller elected to do the certified pre-owned home. They got a pre-inspection. They were ahead of the problem, and their inspection came out perfectly clean. And that means they're going to the finish line. So if you have any questions or you're thinking of making a move, give us a call. We're a company that has your back at 719-301-3900. We have thousands of buyers and our buyers in waiting. We even have cash buyers if you don't want to deal with the traditional sales process. Call us at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
Again, you're listening to Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And if you are thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing, do you need a real estate agent to help you buy a new build home? Stay tuned for that.